Hello and welcome to those that are tuning in currently to the informational meeting on the IRS 60-day reimbursement policy. We are very happy to have you today, and we're very happy to be able to provide this meeting. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to wait maybe just about a minute and see if we can um, get a few more attendees. We're expecting a good turnout today. So we'll get started just momentarily. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Again, I would like to welcome everyone who is now tuning in to the IRS 60-day reimbursement policy informational meeting. We are very happy to be able to provide this meeting. We've promoted this in our Procurement Services campus newsletter and a news flash, and we tried to reach as many people as possible. And so being able to have a meeting like this where we can get people involved that have questions that are, want to know more about this policy, we wanted to make sure that we coordinated this with all the appropriate supporting departments, and we're just really happy to be able to answer any questions that you may have today. My name is John Whitney. I am with the Procurement Center of Excellence. I'm a training specialist, and that is a unit that is within the Procurement Services Department. And I'm just going to be facilitating the first part of this meeting, just to kind of lay down just a few ground rules and do some introductions. With me today is Heather Nicholson. She's also in the Procurement Center of Excellence. And what Heather's going to be doing is she's going to handle the Q&A at the end of the presentation and go over some questions that you may have. And so I will hand the baton off, or actually I won't, the presenters will hand the baton off to Heather at that point. And Heather is also going to drop into the chat a hyperlink to a survey. We always like to hear back from campus about how we're doing, how our training, affected you. If there's, anything that you learned that was valuable today or anything that you'd like to do differently, whatever it may be, we always like to hear that kind of feedback. And she's also going to drop a link in on how to subscribe to our campus newsletter, Procurement Services campus newsletter, which also is the news flashes. That way, if you're interested in keeping up on the latest events and news and what's happening, you'll be able to take part in that. And just like the informational meeting today, as we promoted through those channels, it's really helpful to be able to be a part of that. And if you know someone that wants to also take part in it, you can pass that along to them. Today's meeting will be going from 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. And the presenters for today's meeting is going to be Samantha Dang from the travel department. And it's also going to be Vanessa Panetta from the accounts payable department. Do you both want to just say hello and introduce yourselves?
Everyone, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with me. Again, part of the Travel Services Office, one of the two compliance analysts. We're excited to present this policy to you guys and help you get this launched effectively.
Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa. I work under accounts payable. So if you've ever submitted a non-travel expense report or miscellaneous payment, we've probably spoken before. And yeah, likewise, we're excited to be here to help everyone learn more about this new policy.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Vanessa. And also today we have some supporting departments that are here and some folks that might, answer some questions in the Q&A to your written questions that you may have. We have payroll, we've got global, we've got procurement workday escalation team, and we've got the tax office here as supporting departments. So we're happy to have that representation. So before we jump into the presentation, I just want to let everyone know how it's going to happen with the questions. We prefer that you drop your questions into the Q&A feature and not into the chat. We're going to reserve chat for kind of a one-way communication from us to you, like those hyperlinks I mentioned that Heather is going to be dropping in. And we're going to also reserve chat for things like technical difficulties if you're having trouble hearing or what it may, whatever it may be. With Q&A, we're able to actually do reporting on the questions. It's a way that we can actually keep track of those in case we need to and follow up with folks after the fact. I also want to mention that when it comes to the Q&A and the questions that you're dropping in, feel free to do that as the presentation is going. We will get to those questions on a first come, first served basis. And somebody might actually answer your question in a written format during the presentation as well. So that could happen, but we are going to save all the questions until after the presentation, and we will handle the Q&A at that time. And Heather will be helping out with the Q&A at that point. I also want to mention that today's meeting is being recorded, as you probably saw at the beginning, and click that little OK button. And we are going to have the recording and the slide deck and any outstanding questions with those answers posted within 24 to 48 hours. And those will be posted in two different places. We're going to have it on the travel website, and it's also going to be posted on the procurement services website. And Heather, I believe it's the deep dive page that we're going to be having that,
Yes.
and also the homepage.
We'll have a reference on the homepage, and then it'll be posted on the deep dive webpage.
Great. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that, and if you knew someone that wanted to be able to be here today and they weren't able to, that that we've got that representation with the video, the slides, and we will have those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our subject matter experts, Samantha and Vanessa, if you want to share your screen and start the presentation.
All right. Thank you, John. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot to go over through today. So really quick review of the agenda. So we got the policy first, a little bit of payroll information, exceptions within that policy, other nuances within procurement, the job aid, a little bit of a walkthrough of the job aid, payment information, FAQ, and then Q&A, which will be, again, with Heather at the end. And then we have the last slide, which is our resources. So again, IRS policy, where to send questions to, I believe the SAM manual policy as well. But we shall begin. So just really quick about the policy, everyone knows now, it is going to be effective the 6th of July, a little less than 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so. It's on a Monday. Again, this policy affects employees and student employees. So if you are just a student, or if that person is a visitor or a candidate, it does not affect them. It only affects those who are being reimbursed in an expense report. I've provided 3 links on the slide about where we're pulling this policy from. 2 of them are the IRS, so Rule 2, and then from the IRS section 1.62, the safe harbor, and then lastly, that is also connected in the Washington State OFM 108070B. But just overall, the policy itself is that the expense report needs to be submitted, or those expenses need to be submitted within 60 days of the travel end date. If it's a business travel expense report, or it's going to be based on the date of purchase for non-travel to remain a non-taxable payment or reimbursement. 60 days is chosen out of all those numbers because that is the IRS safe harbor definition of a reasonable time period.
Okay, so a little bit more about the payroll side of things. So if you do submit an expense report that is submitted over 60 days and there isn't an applicable exception, then it will be recorded as imputed income on for the employee, increasing their total taxable wages. So this means that they will be subject to federal and state payroll taxes, which is what we have listed here. For federal taxes, that amount, the ER amount will be subject to Social Security, Medicare, and federal withholding. And for Washington state taxes, it'll be subject to paid family and medical leave and the W Cares Fund. One important thing to note is that if you have any remote workers, so they're not residing or working in Washington, then the state taxes of the state they live in will be applied instead of the Washington state taxes. And we'll go into a little more detail about what exactly this looks like later in the slides, but we just wanted to do a brief overview of the logistics of these reportable or taxable payments.
And then we're just going to go straight into exceptions. Again, it says the top exceptions based on facts and circumstances aligned with IRS reasonable period flexibility. So again, it is posted on both websites, Travel and Procurement, the 3 exceptions. First one is, of course, an extended leave of absence. The documentation is going to be a department confirmation of extended leave of absence for the employee. Then next is going to be business travel for over 60 days. Most people would think it's just travel related, but there are situations when non-travel comes into play. You'll see a question later about it. But for this exception, trip pre-approval and any other documentation showing proof of the continuous 60-day plus travel. And then lastly, mentioned shared environments, there's a delayed submission. It can be the director or the highest reporting authority within a shared environment, giving the explanation and approval. Again, these documentation is very specific. Please make sure these are attached when you answer. And then a little bit of other nuances. So there are cash advances. There's travel advances and field advances. For travel advances, it's not used as often. I'm pretty sure it'll become more in the future. When we're reconciling an expense report or reconciling a travel advance, there's sometimes an overage, either lodging overages or just airfare or other expenses added onto that reconciliation ER. And those will definitely be reimbursed as normal, but the 60-day policy does apply. So not just on top of reconciling, but also, again, reimbursing. We will look into more advances in the future, but right now, since travel advances may have a chance of including a reimbursement in the reconciliation ER, we just want to give you some information. And then for field advances, that is going to be determined. They are working on policy and communication in the near future. We're going to go straight into the job aid. Before we go step by step, there's one big thing with this policy change. So For those who are familiar with the travel expense report, right after you submit the expense report request, a pop-up will be there saying complete questionnaire, and it's the personal time questionnaire. We've been pretty flexible on how people answer this. It's either the actual business dates or they put the whole trip, including personal time. Because of this policy launching July 6th, we're updating this portion of the job aid to officially include everything. So if you have personal time before or personal time after, please include the complete trip into the dates. I know it says business travel start date and end date. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of extra work to do on the back end if we had to change the wording. So for now, it will be still the same wording on that questionnaire, but when we input the dates, it's going to include personal time. And the other option of just having a business start and end is not applicable anymore.
Okay, and on that note, no changes in terms of the expense date for non-travel expense reports, but just as a reminder, when you submit a non-travel expense report, the expense date entered should be the date of purchase. Okay, so now we'll get into what it actually looks like when you create the expense report. So when you create an expense report, whether it be for yourself or for a worker, it'll all look the same in Workday up until the submission. So if you do submit a expense report that has either a travel date or an expense date that exceeds that 60-day window, after you submit the expense report, you will get this pop-up for the questionnaire. Actually, sorry, I was mistaken. For business travel expense reports, you'll have to do the travel expense report or travel questionnaire first. And then when you submit that, you'll get this pop-up for the 60-day questionnaire. For non-travel expense reports, after you submit the expense report, typically it would just go along the approval flow without any questionnaire at all, but now you will have this questionnaire. So just remember that before the expense report is officially submitted, you do have to complete this 60-day questionnaire if your expense report exceeds this period. This is what the questionnaire looks like. So if you are claiming an exception, you can select one of the first three, which Sam mentioned earlier. And if you're not claiming an exception, you would just select none of the above and acknowledge that you understand that this is taxable income. And if you miss the questionnaire or you want to save it for later, before I get to that, once you select the exception that you want to choose, you will be required to attach supporting documentation, which is the examples that Sam mentioned earlier, and those will be subject to procurement review. If you miss the questionnaire or you want to save it for later, you can go find it in your inbox. So just go to your Workday inbox and enter the expense report number and you will find the questionnaire. And like I said, the expense report will not be submitted and will not go through the approval flow until this questionnaire is submitted. So make sure that you keep an eye out for it. Yeah, and then like I said, either select an exception or select none of the above if no exception applies. And then once you submit the questionnaire and attach documents if required, then you will have officially submitted the expense report and you'll see the pop-up saying that it is waiting for a shared environment. Okay, so that is how it's going to look like for whoever is submitting this expense report. Now we're going to get into what it looks like if you are reviewing the expense report. So if you're in a shared environment or expense specialist role, and you're the second approver on the expense report, when you see the expense report in your inbox, under the header of the expense report, you will see this help text that tells you, hey, this expense report is over 60 days. When you see this help text, and really for any expense report, whether it's staged or not, make sure that you review, if it's a travel expense report, make sure that you review the travel end date in the questionnaire. Like we said earlier, the end date is what determines the 60-day window. And if you are reviewing a non-travel expense report, please make sure that you review the expense date and make sure that it is referencing the date of purchase. So for both travel and non-travel, when you're reviewing the travel date or the expense date, please review it against all the supporting documents for accuracy. And then if it is truly aged and it is over 60 days, then you should review the questionnaire. So there will be this questionnaire response tab. If you're reviewing a travel expense report, both the travel and the 60-day questionnaire will be in the same tab. So make sure that you scroll down all the way to the bottom to review the 60-day one. And when you review the questionnaire, you'll see the exception and the attached document, and you'll be able to review to make sure that it's aligned with your review procedures. Okay, and so after the shared environment or expense specialist reviews it and determines it to be acceptable within the policy, it'll continue on to the rest of the approval flow. And if an exception is chosen, all travel expense reports will go to travel services for final review and approval. And all non-travel expense reports will go to accounts payable for final approval. So we're specifically talking about the 60-day or the expense reports that are over 60 days but have an exception chosen. So procurement will have the final review to make sure that everything is acceptable within the IRS policy. Okay, and then once an expense report has been approved by everyone, so it's reached the last stage of approval, this is what it will look like. So essentially it's going to look the same like how they do now on Workday. So as you can see in this example, the last approval was Sydney from the travel office. And then if you see the status of the expense report, it's been paid. And the expense report, if this was an example of one that was taxable, the full expense report will be paid out. So this screen here will look the same, whether it's an aged expense report that's going to be taxable or whether it's just a normal expense report. It'll be paid, fully approved by procurement, and it will pay out in full. Okay, so what happens after the expense report is paid out? So like I said in the slide before this, it'll essentially look the same on Workday. So this chart kind of outlines what actually happens on the back end. So like I said earlier, in Workday, the expense report will be approved by procurement as the final review. And then the expense report will be paid out the following business day and the employee will receive the full amount. So if you submit an expense report for $500 and it's over 60 days and there's no exception and it's taxable, the employee will still receive that $600. And then on the back end, so on the 1st and the 15th of every month, the 1st and the 16th of every month, a Workday integration will be ran and it'll pull all the expense reports that are approved and paid at that time and that are flagged as taxable income. And then on the subsequent payday, then that expense report dollar amount is recorded as imputed income and added to the total taxable wages for the employee. And then the taxes that I mentioned earlier will be calculated using this expense report amount. So for example, if that $500 expense report that I mentioned earlier, if it is paid on the 31st, then on the 1st, it'll be included in that integration that's pulled. And then on the 10th payday, that's when the employee will see that it was recorded as imputed income. And then total imputed income will be, total imputed income that is received during the calendar year, including any expense report amounts that are taxable, will increase the employee's taxable wages on their W-2. Okay, so now that we're done with what it looks like on Workday, and this just a heads up, and this will be included at the end of the presentation. The link to the job aid is updated, so everything we just went over, those are essentially pulled from the job aid. So you can also review it there and review it when this policy is in effect. But some common questions we got regarding the payroll side of things. So the first question is, will the cost center used on the expense report be charged with the additional tax amounts? So the answer is no. The work tags that are used on the expense report will only be charged for the actual reimbursement amount on the ER when the expense report is paid. There will not be any additional amounts that are charged to the work tags, and there will be no additional amounts charged to the department. The second question, and these questions are kind of all related, but we just wanted to make sure we address everything. The second question is, how will any related employer side taxes, deductions, or fringe costs be funded? Are there any additional cost impacts to the department? So just to reiterate, there are no additional costs to the department. The employer tax that is charged will be absorbed by the current or the existing UW fringe benefit rate. And then question number 3, will the fringe benefit rate be applied to taxable reimbursements like we do for salary or wages? And the answer to that is there is no fringe being attached to these payments. These payments are not necessarily processed in payroll. They're processed in Workday, like we showed you earlier. Only the amount of the ER will be transmitted to payroll for processing. So again, there's no fringe being attached to these payments. And then the last payroll question we received is, what if the employee has been terminated? So if the employee has been terminated, they will have, if they've received W-2 reportable wages in the current year, then the payroll team will make the required adjustments to ensure the accurate reporting. If the employee does not have W-2 reportable wages during the calendar year, then the imputed income will be reported on a Form 1099 instead of a W-2. And the individual should receive that at the end of the year. Okay, so for some frequently asked questions for non-travel, one of the questions we received was, I purchased non-travel expenses during my business travel. What is the expense date for the non-travel expense and what exceptions apply? So if you are on travel status and you purchase some non-travel expenses, the expense date will be the date of purchase. So it'll be just like any other non-travel expense. It should be the date that you actually purchase and pay for the item. And it is still expected to be reimbursed within 60 days. The only exception that would apply is if you or the individual you're reimbursing was on travel status for an extended period of time. So that was one of the exceptions that Sam mentioned earlier. So if you're on travel for a long time and by the time you get back, the 60-day window has passed, then you can just claim that exception when submitting the expense report and make sure you attach the appropriate documents.
Okay. And then for policy, is there an exception to the 60-day policy if there are repayment issues? We were actually talking about this today. I know originally on the website it said no exception, but talking to it, there's a lot of different types of repayment issues. So it could be a rejected ACH or wire, and then we talked about returned checks. So for ACH and wire payments, I know some of you have been emailed from, at least Vanessa and I, about a rejected payment. Usually that doesn't have to do with anything in recreating a new ER. So there's no issue with the 60-day policy. Again, it'll just, if you do happen to resubmit the ER, again, it'll just restart the approval flow, but the submission date for the travel side will be based on the first submission. So whatever date is at the top. Usually when you resubmit things over and over again, the newest dates will be at the bottom, so you would have to scroll down. But again, travel end dates, the 60-day will be based on that first submission. One thing also to note about those submissions, again, that the submission itself is going to be on the personal time questionnaire submission, not the expense report submission when it comes to travel, because we already have a 2-step process in comparison to non-travel that just does the request itself originally. But anyways, for returned checks, we came to a consensus that it's going to be up to the department's discretion. There's multiple reasons why a check is returned. It could be possibly at the fault of the employee, maybe the address was incorrect, or it could be a lot of different other factors outside of the employee's control. So we're putting that, we would like to have the department discuss with the employee what happened, and if it does fit within the 60-day policy, they can definitely pick that last shared environment / delayed submission and obtain paperwork of what happened and resubmit that expense report. Next question, the funding source has a delay in receiving funds and the traveler has already purchased the travel expenses. What exception is applicable? So that also goes to that last exception. So there's a delay. It's not really the shared environment's fault, but we understand maybe there's funding, grant funding, federal or non-federal that is delayed. If there is a delay in funding in general, again, obtaining that documentation stating when the funding is planning to come works perfectly with that third exception. You may attach that. Next question is, I already kind of answered earlier, does the travel end date include personal time? Yes, it does. It is a little bit of a change when we submit the personal time questionnaire, but it always will now include personal time. Next question, is there a final cutoff date for any reimbursement submissions? So there might be confusion of like when we will just not reimburse at all. The UW does not have that policy in place. So if you receive something from a department or a school or a unit that decides to just not reimburse at all, that is an internal policy that needs to be made. But overall, enterprise-wide, we do not have a final cutoff date. And then lastly, this was mentioned at the shared environment meeting a couple weeks ago. How does this apply to aggregating expenses, multiple trips into one expense report? It happens quite a bit for travel, at least, when it comes to mileage, especially on the medical side. After a few talks, we do allow it, but it's not recommended. I understand, we understand as procurement, they go out for a month or 3 months or 6 months. We believe best practice is going to be 1 month out or submitting that expense report on a monthly basis. But again, aggregating in general is not recommended. And then procedure, is there a notification to the employee when the reimbursement is marked taxable? So unless you're the employee submitting the expense report, it's going to be the department communicating if it's the department doing on behalf of the employee. But unfortunately, Workday does not have that function. So again, we encourage, if you see it as the fiscal staff, please just let the employee know. Unfortunately, it doesn't say anything at the end either. But again, just communication with your department is the best at this time. And then next is, are there additional steps to take after submitting the expense report for processing the payment as taxable income? Again, Vanessa obviously went over that. Once the ER is fully approved and paid out, no other steps are needed from the department. And then lastly, a question. I prepaid for continuing education and or accreditation fees. How do I request reimbursement? We have made the notion to reimburse that as a non-travel expense report, and it'll be based on the date of purchase. If there is, there usually can be an exception, of course. Sometimes the accreditation, you pay the fee, but then the accreditation doesn't come till like months later. You can select one of the exceptions. I believe it is either the delayed one, I think believe would work out. Working with your department on that, and then obviously obtaining that certification as documentation. And then lastly, what happens if you keep there's multiple sendbacks and resubmissions. Again, just a reminder, this is kind of a little snapshot or screenshot. It'll always be based on the second date at the top of the business process or the approval flow, especially when it comes to a business travel expense report. If it's on travel, it'll just be the top one, but for business travel, it'll be the second one because we have that personal time questionnaire already included in the process. Okay, and then we're ready for you, Heather.
Let's see what we got left, everybody. Our people have been busy firing away at some of these questions. So what do we got at the top here? When the questionnaire option goes live in Workday, what will happen to ERs currently in process, both approval process and or draft status prior to submission?
I believe since they're already in progress, it won't affect their submission. So if they're already submitted it and it gets to either shared environment, cost center manager, or even us at the third approval, it will be affected. I believe it won't be affected by the 60-day, but we can put that in the parking lot and do a little bit more testing and get back to you guys within the 48 hours.
Right, next question. Will there be a letter provided to the departments that departments can send out to faculty and staff with all applicable information?
As in, so in terms of information about this policy, there was a newsflash that went out, and this is all posted to procurement websites as well as travel's website. So we highly recommend making sure all your employees are aware of this and circulating those resources as well as the resources that we're going to include at the end. And like Sam mentioned earlier, those resources all link to the official IRS policy.
Right. Just like how procurement has sent out a mailing list via procurement services and travel, if you guys have one for your department or school, we recommend using that. And you can definitely copy and paste what we wrote on our website as well.
All right. For the fiscal team notifying, can you share the language you are using when self-submitters are notified?
So when self-submitters, or if I'm understanding correctly, when someone submits an expense report, they receive a notification in Workday. But I guess we're not sure what exactly that notification looks like. Maybe we can talk about that and provide more information, but was that what the question was referring to, Heather? Did I misunderstand that?
Were you talking about the 60-day questionnaire when that pops up as the notification?
It's just saying language when self-submitter is notified. If she gives us any extra information, I'll go ahead and go back to it.
But the questionnaire and everything, all those are in the job aid.
Yeah. All right. What about aggregating expense reports for back-to-back foreign conferences? I've seen this several times where it's more cost-effective to stay abroad from the first to the second conference rather than return stateside then travel again. How would you determine the end date for this travel scenario?
So in that case, if it's continuous travel, like back to back, no returning to Seattle, then it's fine to put it on one expense report. For the aggregation, that is not mileage per se. If it's like, oh, I went to Spain for the first week of June, and then I went to Italy the last week of June, and then I went on another trip on the middle of July, and then aggregating those into one when there's definitely clear time in between when you return between all those trips. That is something we don't recommend doing it at all. Again, if it's continuous, like you were in Europe for 3 weeks back to back, I don't know, 3 or 4 conferences or meetings, that is fine to do in an expense report.
All right. Has this process been tested in the Workday sandbox?
Yes.
That was an easy one. There are occasions where an ER had to be canceled. How will the 60-day policy be handled?
So that when an expense report is canceled, If it's canceled by procurement, it most likely relates to one of those scenarios that Sam brought up earlier when she was talking about payment reissues. Like, for example, if a check is returned to our office and we cancel it. So it would really depend on the reason for the cancellation. But if it is due to a return payment or a return check, then like Sam said, the department should work with the employee and figure out why was it returned? Was there something wrong with the address? Was it error outside of their control? And if they believe it to be outside of their control, then they can always submit a new ER, use the original expense date or travel date, but you can choose the shared environment / delay submission exception and then just attach documentation referencing the original ER and kind of explaining what happened.
Excellent. Will there be a job aid with screenshots of the new Workday interface with example answers, especially for all the new fields?
So there aren't any new fields. It's just the questionnaire. So you just have to select one. Unless there's something new for travel, but in terms of non-travel, there's nothing new besides the actual questionnaire. And there are screenshots of the job aid of what that looks like. And our website also has the examples of or the acceptable documentation. Did you want to speak for non-travel or sorry, for travel?
We'll look more into the example answers per se, but again, the fields wise, the Workday was just going to be the question. That's the complete new thing, and maybe the process of answering the personal time question, Workday wise. But for example answers, we might come back to you about that. If the department is having difficulty determining what the documentation needs to be.
Sorry if I missed the answer. Is the 60-day window means the ER needs to be created within 60 days or submitted within 60 days?
It needs to be submitted within 60 days. So we have people, we've seen it all the time. I'm pretty sure departments as well. They create ERs maybe the day before, or it could be 3 months before. So it'll just be on the submission date.
Will there be a notification in Workday indicating that this will become taxable income either while submitting the ER or after as a prompt to the employee?
The only thing that'll notify is if that complete questionnaire pops up, unfortunately, when you're in the process of submitting. And for obviously for the shared environment, it'll have that help text in the header, but other than those two notifications, that is it at this time.
Back to the self-submitter question, she was referring to over 60 days. What are they told about this being taxable? I think they're meaning in Workday.
So when you submit the expense report, whether you're submitting it for yourself or for someone else, if it is over 60 days, on the questionnaire, the last option says, I might be mixing the words a little, but and we can refer the screenshot, but it says that an exception does not apply. I understand that this will be taxable income. And that is the only verbiage in terms of the ER.
In the questionnaire, though, if you have it pop up, we do link the procurement website for the policy. So if you have it pop up, whether you're a traveler or department, please take a pause and click it and review before you submit. So you just have a better understanding of the questionnaire and what's happening.
If the end date determines the date of travel, how does the date of the expense affect all this?
So non-travel and travel expense report should be submitted on separate expense reports. So they shouldn't affect the other. For the travel expense report, you'll use the last date of travel. And then for the non-expense report, you'll include all your, I'm sorry, for the non-travel expense report, you'll include all your non-travel expenses and you'll use the date of purchase. So they should be separate, which is a current policy that we have.
Back to the sandbox question. My question was really about anything we may need to watch out for.
Do you mean approval wise, Marissa? If we're not getting your question again, feel free to just email us either at PCS or travel, and we can just help you one-on-one.
All right. What about if the purchase had been made, but the items will be received more than 60 days later from the time of purchase?
That's a good question. So, for non-travel expenses, the IRS verbiage is that the expenses should be reimbursed 60 days from the date of purchase. So we expect all reimbursements to be completed within that time frame. And when accounts payable reviews non-travel expense reports, we just look for the proof of payment or the receipt. We don't necessarily look for the confirmation that it was delivered. That being said, we do know that that might be an internal procedure that departments have, and it's a good one to have. So what I recommend in those cases, when someone purchases something on behalf of your department, if you're approaching that 60-day window and the goods still haven't been delivered, then you'll need to work with that employee and kind of figure out if you just want to submit the reimbursement. Or if you do want to wait until the goods have been confirmed to be delivered, and it ends up exceeding the 60 days, when you submit the expense report, the expense date should still be the date of purchase. And when you fill out the questionnaire, just select the shared environment / delayed approval selection and just attach the documentation from your shared environment or from the supervisor explaining that due to the internal policy, we didn't request reimbursement until the goods were delivered. So in short, you can use shared environment / delay submission exception, but the expense date should still be the date of purchase.
Great. And Ruth, I'm guessing that might answer your question too, but if it didn't, feel free to let us know. When did you say the updated workday guide is available? I'm assuming they're referring to the job aid, and that is live now. So, I'll go ahead and plug that into the chat in just a moment. When counting 60 days, what is day one? Is that the day the expense happened or the day after?
If we're referring to non-travel expenses, day one would be the date of purchase. Or that's when the 60 days starts calculating.
Yeah, and for travel, it'll be the day after.
What if you submit the report within 60 days, but it isn't approved within 60 days?
It only matters on the submission. So if we happen to approve at 71 days, for example, it doesn't affect anything regarding the reimbursement itself. It's just literally the approval flow. So we don't affect anything regarding taxable reimbursements in this process.
Is there a timeline for when we can anticipate the workday questionnaire language to be updated from business travel dates to more accurately reflect both business and personal travel dates?
Right now, we've already spoke with our procurement IT, and it's a much larger impact process-wise than expected. Unfortunately, until we have a better way to fix this without affecting the current process, we can't give a timeline at this time. We'll keep it on the back burner because we all, of course, want that the language to change on the personal time questionnaire. But right now, unfortunately, we do not have a timeline because of the back end process to fix it.
For employees with questions about their paycheck being impacted due to a taxable reimbursement, who do we direct them to for answering questions they have?
So it's overall, they are reimbursements. They are to come to PCS and travel. And then from there, we can help redirect you guys to the right people, or we ourselves can reach out to those offices that can assist.
Right. So I got a two-parter here. So if an item like a book is ordered but does not arrive until 3 months later, when does the 60 days start? For example, Amazon doesn't bill until an item is shipped, so the person would not have proof of payment.
So, the expense date would be the date of purchase, so that would be whenever the credit card, is charged, when payment actually happens. So if the receipt doesn't show the payment date, you can always submit a credit card statement or something showing the actual date, and that's what we'll use, basically whenever the employee was charged. Yeah, and like I said earlier, if the delivery date exceeds that 60-day window, and they don't submit it until after due to an internal policy, then you can claim the exception.
Do these details apply only to reimbursement expense reports and not CTA reports?
CTA is more of a verification and not a reimbursement that is paid out to the traveler. I know in the ER system, it looks like it's being paid out, but it's not. As it is only a verification of CTA transaction, so no reimbursements involved.
So it was to verify if for a goods purchase reimbursement requirement, they are asking if you're telling us the goods reimbursements require proof of delivery.
No, we require proof of payment. Because once payment is made, we have a responsibility to reimburse the individual. But I believe the question was related to some departments may have an internal policy that you can't request reimbursement until goods are delivered. So that was to address that. But on an enterprise AP level, we require proof of payment.
I believe when an expense report is paid, the employee receives a direct deposit separate from their paycheck. If the ER was submitted after 60 days and is subject to taxable income, should they still expect a separate direct deposit, or will they have to wait until their paycheck?
Yes, so they can expect a separate direct deposit. So that relates to the flow map earlier, where essentially, like for example, let's say an expense report was approved by AP on June 26th. And then usually the employee can expect to receive their reimbursement the next business day. So June 27th, they should expect that $500 deposit. And then their next paycheck will be impacted. So if something is paid on the 26th, then an integration will be ran and it'll capture it on the 1st, and that'll be included on the paycheck on the 10th. So they are separate deposits, and it's probably was easier to explain when I had the map up, but they are separate deposits. And it just depends on, as long as it's paid, if it's paid before the paycheck, it'll be included in that one if it captures into the integration, but they will remain separate, to answer your question.
We'll also add that photo or the flow to the website for you guys.
I may need Ruth to give me a clarifying statement on what is true. I know you're asking what's true, and I'm just double checking what you're referring to. Which part are you double checking is true or not? In the meantime, if travel ends 6:30, does 60 days start from 6:30 or 7/1? If 7/1, why? Since it's not the end date for the travel.
Yeah, I would say that end date, so if the travel ends on 6:30, that would be day 0. And then would 7/1 be 1 day after that, 2 days after that, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah, and I think I need to clarify what I said earlier about non-travel expenses. I think I said the purchase date or the date of purchase is day 1. but it follows the same logic. So if you purchase something on 6/30, that's day 0, and 7/1 is day 1.
Per UW policy, so I'm only going to take a couple more questions, everybody, because we got to wrap up in the next few minutes. But per UW policy, we always ask for itemized receipts no matter the transaction. If we cannot obtain itemized receipts from the requester, but we can obtain a non-itemized receipt from them, does that count as valid proof of purchase, etc., with this new reimbursement policy?
So if there are multiple items purchased, I assume that is what this is in reference to. That's correct. We do require itemized or separate receipt. If you've made all attempts to obtain one and you can't obtain one, then please note that in the comments of the ER. And in terms of documentation, we would just need some kind of documentation of the full amount that was charged. And you'll need to provide a breakdown of what was included in the amount and what exactly, as in like it could be a breakdown on Excel or something like that, like a list of what was included and what we are reimbursing. But this is in last case scenario after all attempts have been made to obtain a receipt.
Will a unit see this on payroll earnings and the actuals reports?
Andrew, are you able to come off mute?
Yeah, so we have
Yeah,
Andrew Cleary.
I'm here,
from
yeah.
the payroll.
Sorry,
Hi,
that-
we might defer this
trying to click
question
myself off
Andrew.
mute. Computed income is not a wage, so it won't be on there. There's no expense to the department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Is the 60th day late or within the time?
Oh, so it's over 60 days. So 60 day is the last day you can submit it. Once it hits the 61st day after that travel end date or date of purchase, then that's when that questionnaire will pop up.
All right, I'm going to do one more and I think I'll wrap up then. Just to clarify, if a fiscal specialist received a reimbursement request after the 60-day window, it's not up to them to determine whether it goes to have wage taxes applied. That is determined separately from a different group. So we're basically submitting as normal.
If you are submitting an expense and it's 60 days old when it comes to you, you'll indicate that when you submit it on Workday, because you have to put in the date of purchase or the last day of travel. And when you submit the expense report, that questionnaire will pop up because Workday will recognize, oh, this is over 60 days, and that questionnaire will pop up, and you will need to determine if there is an exception or not. And that your answer to the questionnaire is what determines if it's taxable income or not. So if you receive a reimbursement and it's over 60 days, I recommend reaching out to that employee and figuring out why and if there is an exception that they're claiming. And if not, then you'll select an exception does not apply, and that's what will determine that it will be treated as taxable income. So it's determined based on your response to the questionnaire.
Thank you. All right, well, so we only have like another minute and a half left. So what I want to do to wrap up is remind everybody that any of these leftover questions we didn't get to today, the team here is going to take a look at and provide answers to that we can post on the website so that everybody can take a look. We are also recording this. This is going to be posted on the procurement website, on the deep dive webpage, like a reference to it on the homepage, so it'll be easy to find. Samantha, will it be referenced on the travel site as well?
Yes.
Okay, it'll be on the travel site too for everybody, as well the slide deck, so that everybody can take a look at that at a later date as well. And we really appreciate everybody taking the time to come out. I appreciate everybody who showed up to answer questions and present. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sam, Vanessa, everybody who came today. Thank you, John, for starting us off. Thank you so much for all the good questions. Hopefully this provided a lot of clarity for everybody, and any other leftover questions. You'll have some your team contact emails, obviously, with the travel team and with PCS help. So if something comes up in a couple days and you don't remember, always feel free. You can always contact our units at those times. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today.
Thank you,
I hope it was
everybody.
helpful, and have a great rest of your afternoon, or if you're off of work, have a great rest of your day.